Hey y'all, quick note. While My Hero Academia was created for kids, this podcast is not safe for work or children. All trigger warnings and spoilers for each episode can be found at our website, myheroanalysis.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey y'all, welcome to our second bonus episode. This time around, we'll be talking about color theory, how the color schemes the My Hero creators chose for the characters can influence our opinions and expectations of those characters, as well as how some of these color schemes can reinforce the themes of the novel. Not the novel, the manga. My bad.
There are novels too, but they're not as colorful.
Yeah. So a lot of you are already going to be familiar with some of Western color theory from TikTok. It's actually one of the few things that like TikTok consistently gets correct. But hopefully we can still include some new information. And we're gonna go in a few different directions. We're gonna go on a bit of a journey. So bear with me.
Yeah. And just so listeners know, this is Nicole, by the way. I have no idea what color theory is or how it works beyond the red-blue pairing you always hear about. So hit me.
Yes, I love color theory. And it is something that, I repeated that twice. So listeners, this was the episode I was at a bar. But anywho, yeah, I am not as passionate about it as Wyatt is. I actually got my minor in art studies.
Mm-hmm.
So I know quite a lot about it, but I got inside and it traumatized me.
Aw.
But yeah, so Wyatt, take it away.
Yeah, this is definitely a fixation of mine. Like Maria said, went to art school. All of this information is going to be familiar. I was a comm studies major. Color theory was also a big section, and I just took it and ran with it. So yeah, this is going to be a bit of a longer episode. And I broke it down into sections. So first, I'm going to give like a very, very brief, not comprehensive at all overview of how we see color vision, speculations on how humans evolved to see color, a bit about how ancient humans discuss color. So that's going to be the first section.
Good God. You went deep. I love this so much. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm not surprised they did. Wyatt is thorough.
Oh my God. When I can be bothered to. Yeah, I can be thorough. So to start right into it, so roughly speaking, human retinas have two main categories of photoreceptors, typically called rods and cones. A lot of people are going to be familiar with that already.
Kinky.
AKA all the things wrong with my eyes.
Oh, poor baby. You got bad vision.
I really do. That's not even a joke.
Yeah.
I have like -6 and -5.5 or something like that. I don't know.
Holy God.
It's fine though. It's not. I wear contacts and glasses. So I have that going for me.
Yeah. So just to break it down really quick, rods, fancy name, rhodopsin, distinguish between light and shadow. Crazy sensitive. So they're really good for seeing in low light conditions. Cones, fancy name photopsin, they distinguish between color, which gives us better spatial acuity, lets us see in bright light conditions because color acts as a kind of filter. And humans as a species have 3 cone types, which give most of us trichromatic vision. So that's short wavelength sensitive cones. So that's like the bluish side of the color spectrum, possibly the least sensitive of the cones, but that was only mentioned in like 1 or 2 of my sources. So I'm not sure how widespread that idea is. And then you have mid wavelength sensitive cones, which is like the greenish middle part of the color spectrum, and then long wavelength sensitive cones. And that's like the reddish side of the color spectrum, possibly the most sensitive of the cones, but who knows? These are definitely not the only kinds of photoreceptors out there. So for instance, there are also cones that pick up UV light. So, bees can see UV light. The ancestors to humans used to have this, and some monkey species, especially, it's more common in mammals that are nocturnal. So ancestors to humans used to have this, but we don't have that anymore. A lot of proposed explanations for why we don't, but I'm not getting into it here. That's a whole that's a whole fight in the in the community.
Yeah, well, I personally believe that it's because the universe knew that we would be going to raves and shit, and we did not need to see bodily fluids all the time.
That's not where my mind went, but I mean, my mind works in mysterious ways. We're not going to get into that.
Yeah, not being able to see UV light is definitely helpful in raves. So there's a lot of speculation about how exactly color vision evolved and which color humans evolved to see first. So there's genetic evidence to suggest that at least some humans have had all three cones since we became like our own separate species. But as we know now, color vision is highly variable from person to person. There is some genetic and historical evidence to suggest that our ability to see red and green, or at least the ability to distinguish between those two, came first, and that blue color vision came last. Some historians think the ability to see blue didn't become widespread till like as recently as 6,000 years ago, although that isn't as supported by science.
The sky just wanted to be appreciated.
Yeah. This is probably where the saying you can say the sky is blue, but someone will disagree comes from.
Maybe.
Also, I did there isn't actually a word for blue up until like 6,000 years ago. That's why they think it's about 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Fact.
Yeah. So in most languages, the first mentions of color, the first like descriptions of colors as separate from others, like they tend to follow the same pattern if you trace like the history of ancient texts that we have. So black and white or dark and light come first. And then after a couple thousand years, you'll find red mentioned, especially when it comes to wine and blood, then yellow, and then green, blue. Names, like specific words for that color, as Maria mentioned, didn't pop up till very recently in the text that we have access to. And a lot of modern languages still treat green and blue as different shades of the same color.
Well, that's not really surprising about the wine and blood because humans are very predictable. But blue and green are not the same color.
Yeah, this definitely differs from culture to culture. In the West, we definitely treat them differently. I also wanted to note the Japanese word for green that's used in the anime, midori, was often used interchangeably with and less frequently than ao or blue, and became more specific and more commonly used after the occupation immediately following World War II, which definitely had a westernizing influence.
Yeah, and I was wondering if this is why his costume sometimes looks kind of bluish, or are they just happen to use a slightly different shade, or is colorblindness to blame when they're actually doing the coloring?
I do have some speculations, and we'll get to that a little later on.
All right.
Yeah. And then you'll also find today that ao is also still commonly used to describe things that Westerners would think of as green, notably like vegetation.
Languages are hard.
They are really hard. Yeah. So the big question is this necessarily solid evidence that ancient humans couldn't see certain colors? And it's unclear. One of the reasons is that blue actually isn't all that common in nature, like other than the sky. Like Westerners think of blue, like of water as blue, but it actually usually isn't, except when it's both very clear and very deep. And that just doesn't happen that often. And then blue dyes didn't exist till like 4,000 years ago. So maybe the reason it was never mentioned in ancient literature is because like the topic just didn't come up very often.
Oh, the poor, sad indigo milk cap mushroom. It is very blue, and no one thinks of it.
Yeah, nobody was writing about it. But then like also like some ancient texts describe things being weird colors sometimes. So like who the fuck knows? But then also, this is the issue that I kept running into. There's all sorts of different ways that you could take every argument. So color blindness is way more common in people who with just one X chromosome as opposed to people who have two X chromosomes. And since people with two X chromosomes were generally barred from learning or writing in cultures all over the world for a really long time, and then what they did create was destroyed or repressed or ignored by modern historians, like that could also account for some of the weird color descriptions in well-known ancient texts. It's this whole thing.
See, I came into this episode all excited to learn about rainbows and shit. But now I'm mad all over again at all of history. Good Christ. The words we could have had by now.
Mm-hmm.
It is my time to shine.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why it is more common for 1X chromosome people versus 2X is because it's a recessive
vision.
gene. Color vision is a recessive gene. So if there are 2X's, one of them has the recessive gene and one of them doesn't, it cancels out. So for a 2X person to get
color
blindness, they have to have the gene on both chromosomes.
Yeah.
So that is why 2X people don't get it as much.
Yeah. And then like taking things from another angle. So people have been fighting over the whole, like, does perception come first or does ability to describe come first? Like that whole question for fucking centuries, and no one's found a definitive answer.
Yeah. And I mean, not to get argumentative, but you kind of got to see something before you can describe it, at least for color, maybe, I guess.
I mean, not necessarily. You can describe the shape of something and still figure out what it is. I think I was thinking of an apple around this time.
Yeah. So just to clarify what I mean a little more specifically. So like the technical ability to see a color and the ability to distinguish that color from other colors are two different skills. And in fact, Maria, if I'm correct, I believe they involve different parts of the brain, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember where it goes, but it is two different parts of the brain.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to know information, go to Google.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, like we've already discussed, color blindness definitely exists. So there's 4 kinds of red-green color blindness and then 2 kinds of blue-yellow color blindness. And interestingly enough, red-green color blindness is more common. Has this always been true? Again, no one agrees.
Why does no one write these things down? Yeah, I know that's reductive, but come on, write shit down and then don't lose it or burn it or let it mildew.
I kind of agree. And I also have a lot of thoughts on like the accessibility of information, but that's another conversation for another time.
I also have a lot of thoughts on this. I didn't actually write down a note about this because I probably skipped over this, but anywho,
you were at a bar and then also like, oh my God. Okay. So like I do the timeline in like numbered bullet points and I had so many different layers of bullet points that it's almost unreadable on mobile.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad my phone is a little bit bigger because I just flipped it and
I'm so sorry.
It was a whole thing, but it's kind of my fault for doing it at a bar anyways.
But also I got completely out of control and I had to pull myself back from so many different tangents.
It's fine. But yeah, no, I do agree with that. But then again, a lot of knowledge was lost because people like to burn shit down. I'm looking at you, Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I can say this because I was a former Catholic.
Yeah. So I found the fact that red-green color blindness is more common really interesting because there's this really popular theory that the ability to distinguish between red and green was this like massively advantageous evolutionary trait because it made both foraging and hunting a hell of a lot easier. So current colorblindness statistics might only reflect modern conditions where not being able to distinguish between those colors isn't a life or death issue.
The only thing my brain could come up with for that is that they're de-evolving. And that's just gonna cause so much anger over all of evolution. So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, it's just interesting, like how all of that works. Also of note, so yes, the Japanese language doesn't have a huge distinction between green and blue, but also Japanese people have had access to really good dyes for a couple of millennia now, and they produced hundreds of shades. And like, this is just the official, like traditional colors, like using traditional dyeing methods. So like clearly not specifying between green and blue language-wise didn't stop them from both perceiving and then recreating like many, many shades of each color. So like not using a particular word isn't necessarily an indication that you can't actually see that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have no idea if this section has a point or even relates to the rest of the information in this episode. But I spent a lot of time on it and I thought it was interesting. So you're getting it anyway.
I mean, I'm always happy to get mad about history and science. So good job.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Okay, so now that I've dumped all that onto you, I want to move on to the second section. And I wanted to talk about a few differences in color meaning between the US and Japan. Because there's a lot of overlap, but there are some differences. So as I mentioned before, the US occupied Japan for a while after World War II. And both that and general globalization of popular media means that there's less difference than you might think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at least we, as in the white American co-hosts on this podcast, should apologize again for colonization. But that's a whole heck of a lot of nuance that we just do not have the space to get into here. But just know, we know colonization is bad.
Oh, yes.
I have much to say about this, but I'm going to stay quiet this time.
Yeah, it'll definitely come up again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially with me on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For y'all listeners, I am Mexican, so
Yes.
I got a lot to say. Also, Mexican, queer, I don't even know. I'm all sorts of minorities, but it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. Anyways, continue, Wyatt.
Yeah, so both cultures have a history of associating color with social ranking and perceived virtue, which is pretty common globally, but every culture is going to do this in slightly different ways. In modern Western culture, this is like pretty damn cut and dried. Like the most variation you'll find on what I'm about to talk about is like people intentionally inverting these tropes to play on your expectations, but even then, these tropes still form the foundation of that. But basically how it works is that traditionally white is at one end of the virtue spectrum, which is like the good or the uncomplex end. And then bad is at the other end of that spectrum, which is like, black is at the other end of that spectrum, which is like the bad or the complex end. And yes, Western society does associate complexity with badness. Oh God.
There is so much in those few little words, Lord.
Yeah. And then cooler and paler colors are associated with goodness, innocence, immaturity, youth. Warmer, deeper colors are associated with badness, knowledge, maturity, age. This has so many different effects on our society.
Yeah. And like I was taking these notes and I summed it up for myself as kids are rolling all around in the mud, learning and shit. And then they have to wear it upon their person to show their brains to people without words. I get it. I'm learning, but also why is my brain like this when I am learning new things?
Yeah, it's a lot. And like it hasn't always been this cut and dried. And certain colors have definitely flip-flop in meaning over the centuries. That's another rabbit hole for a different day.
Yeah. Well, see, the only color thing I know is that purple was for the royals. So
You're right.
I'm learning everything.
Yeah. As your local emo child or former emo child or elder emo, I don't know. All I cared about was black, but that was to match the emptiness inside.
Again, black associated with that kind of mentality. Yeah. So in Japanese culture, the breakdown is a lot more complicated and nuanced, at least as far as I could tell. Also, researching like specifically Japanese color theory as it applies to television and film went nowhere. Oh my God. It was so frustrating. I had to like pivot my focus to fashion history in order to get like any kind of information at all. So I'm just like really hoping there's some overlap here. Yeah, so hopefully at least some of this is correct. And please reach out if any of this is wrong. So all my sources, which of course will be posted on the website, I've included a link to the, I can never say this properly, 12-level cap and rank system, which is like this system of, as I mentioned, a lot of times colors are ranked according to like social status. This seems to have been borrowed from or inspired by China. Also, there's like way more information on Chinese color theory than on Japanese color theory, like go figure.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other rabbit hole that we are not well informed enough to plumb, but we know it's there.
Yeah, so I don't perfectly understand this system because there's like a lot of social context that obviously I'm missing. But generally, what I gathered is that although certain colors are associated with certain social statuses, the colors associated with lower statuses weren't automatically associated with negative traits, although their virtue ranking system is also different from Western standards. So, like, shrug emoji.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. But basically, just to give it like a very brief summary, cool colors are generally considered calming, while warm tones are considered energizing. Pale or very bright colors are more likely to be associated with like youth or early sexuality. That all seems to be pretty consistent across the globe. How much of that is due to European colonizing influence and how much of that is hardwired into our brains is unclear. Good luck researching that. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. And then warmer dark colors aren't necessarily more likely to be associated with negative traits in the same way that the West does it. And then also any one color could be associated with both positive and negative traits that often relate to each other in some way. So basically, this is all to say color symbol, motherfucker. Color symbolism is going to be way more nuanced than with Western shows.
Got it.
Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there because pretty much all academic material about color theory that I could find, especially as it applies to modern film and television, was massively Western-centric. Films that aren't produced in the Europe or the US are still default, like the default analysis is to analyze it through a Western lens. So like, despite all this overlap, it's still entirely possible that the stuff I'm about to say in this next section only applies to Western viewers, and East Asian viewers might have a completely different interpretation.
Yeah. And if you do, and you'd like to, tell us about it.
Yes, I would love more information. Please.
Yeah. Why it will start vibrating if we get any sort of contact about this.
Oh my God. I will be in the stratosphere. Okay, so the next section I wanted to talk about is the color wheel specifically, because I'm going to bring it up a lot. So in the West, red, yellow, and blue, well, at least if you're in like elementary or middle school, are considered primary colors, and then green, orange, and purple are considered secondary colors. And then you have black, white, brown, and gray, also sometimes pale or dull blue. These are considered neutrals, although black and white are higher impact and thus more strictly coded than the other neutrals. And we will get to black and white later.
Yeah. So technically it is magenta. Yellow and cyan. I know because it got drilled into my head for my minor. Christ, an art student. There is a fun story about that involves Mountain Dew and paint fumes.
Oh God.
Oh dear.
Is that the one where you were painting in a closet?
No.
Oh
my God. There's a second story?
No, I wasn't painting in a closet. So I was painting in my room with the door shut. So I took an art class during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, a huge mistake because it's very fast paced. And I had to turn in about 4 or 5 different projects by the end of the week.
Oof.
So I closed the door and I was just painting. There were art projects all over the room. I had Doctor Who on, and I drank a 12-pack of Mountain Dew in like the span of 3 hours trying to do this.
What?
Oh my God.
Getting high off of paint fumes. And I'm crying on the floor. And at some point, my roommate walks in and she knocks on my door because she could hear me. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like in tears with paint surrounding me. And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay. Why did I do this?"
Oh, baby.
And she was like, "We need to get you out of here. Let's go do something." And she took me out of my room, saved me. But yeah, so if any of our viewers are doing any sort of art class, please don't do a summer class.
Oof. Yeah,
You
that
will
sounds really
regret
rough. Yeah, so like Maria mentioned, when you get older, you realize the breakdown isn't quite that simple. There's the red, green, blue color spectrum, and then the magenta, yellow, and cyan. If you want more information, go to Google and type in RGB versus CMYK, and you'll find a lot of like really good simple breakdowns about it. In fact, I might go ahead and just include one in my sources. So
That's probably a good idea.
yeah, go to the website. Also, our website needs more traffic. But moving on, so imagine this wheel with the whole rainbow of colors. So colors next to each other on the wheel are complementary, which means they're very similar. Colors opposite each other are contrasting, which means they're very different. And then you can combine complementary and contrasting colors in all sorts of different ways into color schemes.
Yeah, and this has just thrown me back to elementary school art classes where like the one good art thing I did was we were coloring gourds or something like with complementary colors. And I did good on the shading. And this was in first grade, which is 6 years old for any non-American listeners. And I have gotten worse at visual art ever since.
Oh, baby.
So this is why none of this is familiar to me.
Yeah, the color wheel was another thing that got drilled into my head.
Yeah, so just so a few other terms I'm just going to mention really quick because I'll be using them a lot. So color scheme, also called a color palette, and it's just the collection of colors that you choose to work with. For characters, it's usually between 3 to 5 colors. Usually artists try to keep it more towards 3 than towards 5. And then there's character design versus motif, or I think leitmotif is technically the more correct term, but it's also really fucking pretentious. So I will not be using
I agree.
leitmotif. Yeah, it's a stupid ass word. Anyway, so character design is just what the character looks like, the physical details of their appearance. Motif, think broader. So it's not just their appearance, it's also that character's narrative arc. The backgrounds are usually set against, the emotions or characteristics that they're associated with. So sometimes a character's overall motif is described as a color or a few colors. This is what TikTok is usually talking about. Although TikTok usually uses the word aesthetic, which honestly I should probably have used for my notes because more people are familiar with it. And it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, like when I'm writing, the story tends to have a color associated with it in my head. And that's what I call the aesthetic. But now I have the new correct word to use for it. So thank you.
Aesthetic is also correct. I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah, if y'all want to, I can send a picture of my art wheel that I did. I kept it because it was my blood and tears, literally.
Yeah, do it. Take like a good picture of it, and then I can link that on the website too.
Yeah.
So yeah, just gotta go find it first. So color schemes, I'm going to break that down a little further, generally have one foundation color supported by a few accent colors. So if an artist chooses complementary accent colors, that's a little more common with ensemble casts or casts that have a whole bunch of main characters, because it's easier to pick out a specific character from the rest if they're all clearly distinct from each other.
Yeah, especially when there's 20 fucking students in every damn shot.
Yeah. And then contrasting accent colors are more common if there are only a few main characters, because you're staring at them a lot. They're on screen a lot. So they got to look visually interesting to keep your attention. However, obviously there are exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions. If a secondary character has highly contrasting accent colors, that's often code for a big personality. So like, for example, think of Nina and Denki. Or sometimes it's hinting at conflicting personality traits or some kind of inner conflict. So think of like Ochako and Shoto, or Haru from Fruits Basket, to use a non-My Hero example.
Oh, sweet goth Haru. I was so confused when we learned how old he was in comparison with the rest of the main crew because of that color scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I love him.
Mm-hmm.
We are big Haru fans.
Mm-hmm.
Big fans. Of course, a lot of shows don't fall perfectly into either of these categories, like My Hero, because there are definitely just one or just a couple of main characters, but then we also spend a lot of time with a lot of the side characters. So it's kind of a hybrid. And then also in a lot of shows, the small connections between characters are a really big part of the show's themes. Again, think My Hero.
Yeah, always with the goddamn themes in this show. I am so tired and so impressed. And sometimes the curtains are just blue, y'all.
Yeah. So the reason I like color themes is because it'll help you recognize a character, especially when things are really high paced.
Yes.
And especially like if the frames are really, really quick, like a dash of color and you know who it is, even if you can't see like their face or anything.
Yeah, so much of color theory as it applies to character design specifically is aimed directly at reducing the amount of time it takes you to recognize a character. Like they want it to be as instantaneous as possible. Where was I? Okay, yeah. So in shows like these that are kind of like that hybrid model, you're going to see a lot more contrasting accent colors in everyone's color schemes. And also you're going to see characters sharing foundation colors or sharing accent colors. So if characters are intimately connected, they'll often have the same accent color. So think like Gran Torino, Nana, and All Might as like a trio. Or sometimes you'll see one character's accent color will be the same as another character's foundation color. So Katsuki Izuku, also Toga's pink coat.
Yes. And when I got to this bullet point, I wanted to quiz myself. So I put the color yellow is for Gran Torino, Nana, and All Might.
Yep.
And then green is for Katsuki and Izuku. And then pink is actually for Toga Chako.
Yes, correct. Gold star for you, 100%.
Yay, I finally got an A in art class.
We're proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, since animated shows typically favor highly saturated colors, and My Hero is a superhero show, so that means like super bright saturated colors only. You only want high impact stuff. Like that limits how many colors you have to pick from. So sometimes they just got to be reused, and it's fine. Like Nicole said, sometimes the curtains are just blue, and this is why color analysis is just one factor in your overall character analysis. It's not the end all be all. Also, other shows that maybe aren't aimed at such a young audience or don't have like that supernatural element are going to have more variation, and they're also going to rely more heavily on neutrals, especially in backgrounds. Okay, so next I wanted to concentrate on just a couple of main characters. Personally, I think these three are the main characters, but that's just like if you put a gun to my head and told me to narrow it down. But also these three are really good examples of the rest of the points that I want to make. So it was very convenient. So let's look at All Might first. So in Western media, main character color schemes typically default to primary colors, which again for us would be red, blue, and yellow. All Might's a Westaboo. This tracks. Western cartoon characters, you'll see a lot of yellow. Minions, Simpsons. One of the reasons for that is it's just a really easy color for your eyes to track across the screen. And it stands out even if your background is also brightly colored. Red and blue foundation colors are complicated. So like, okay, in the West, red is often evil coded, while blue is often good coded. But then also red is considered active and blue is considered passive.
Yep. And here comes all the red blue dynamic stuff. I could tell. I'm excited.
Yes. Also, this could change depending on color saturation. For example, pink and red in the West are considered completely different colors, even though they're not. They're just different shades of the same color. They code for very different things. There are reasons. If you ever want to have just like a really strange night, pour yourself a beverage of your choice and then go Google the European history of pink. It's a wild ride. it takes a lot of weird turns. It's so strange.
Okay.
But basically, the result of this weird tension between red and blue's varying characteristics is that often you'll find that if red and blue characters are on the same side, red is the leader. So think Power Rangers.
And Voltron. Even though Voltron. Don't watch it. Don't watch it. It ended so badly.
Oh no. Also Power Rangers is originally Japanese. By the way.
Oh, that makes sense. That's interesting.
You're welcome.
And then you'll also find that if red, blue, and characters are on opposing sides, blue is the protagonist and red is the antagonist. So a really common example on TikTok is She-Ra.
Yeah, my mind has now officially been blown.
Yeah, so She-Ra is actually a really good example of the red and blue motif or aesthetic, which actually it doesn't perfectly translate to their actual character designs, because Adora's character design like kind of precariously balances red and blue, and that means all sorts of shit. And then Katra's character design transitions from red to like this pink purple. And on that note, if a typically red character starts looking kind of purple, or a typically blue character starts looking kind of green, something is up with them mentally / shit is about to go down in their arc. And then these arcs, when they resolve, either characters go back to their original color scheme, if it's like an overcome a challenge or rediscover your old self kind of narrative, or sometimes characters will adopt a new color scheme entirely if it's like a redemption / damnation or like a reveal your inner self kind of narrative. So Toru and Yuki from Fruits Basket are a really good example of like motifs or aesthetics that shift slowly over time to show the progression of the character arcs. And then Katra, of course, is like the ultimate example of how this applies to character design specifically, and sort of also motif.
Got it. But also either on air or not on air, I'm going to need you to walk me through Toru's, like her changes, like I'm a toddler. Because all I remember is that she had a lot of bows.
Yeah, so the bows kind of do contribute to it. But basically Toru, when she first starts out, is pink. She's like very feminine and cheerful and wants to take care of everybody. And then very slowly, as like the cracks in her personality start to show, she becomes more associated with the color light blue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just have to do another rewatch. Dang.
Is that a bad thing though?
Of course not. It's Fruits Basket.
Yeah,
Also,
I'm currently watching it again.
Nice.
Oh my God. It took everything in me to not turn this into a Fruits Basket or a She-Ra episode.
I know.
Maybe if
so much restraint was demonstrated.
Maybe if we get enough listeners, we can ask if they want to hear an expanded version of this episode that focuses on Fruits Baskets and She-Ra. But we will wait to see if they ask.
I would really love that.
Yeah. Also, I just added a note. So this reminds me of chakras, which is a very Eastern thing. So every chakra is a different color and it represents a different part of personality. Like one of them is for your head, like mentally. One of them is like your throat chakra, which is how you speak, how you talk. So one is for passion. So everyone has a different color. So that's just what it reminded me of.
Yeah, I completely forgot to look up chakras.
Yeah, I did too, until this very moment.
God damn it. That would have been great. Oh, well, we soldier on. But damn, that would have been good. Fuck. Oh, well. Instant regret.
It's okay. Maybe we can do a part 2 later.
Maybe. I would love that. Oh my God, y'all, seriously, I got so excited over this episode that like I haven't been sleeping well all week just because I've been looking forward to it. So
yeah. And you've been vocal about that in like all our group chats.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping this is living up to it for you.
I'm having such a good time. I love talking about this. Everyone is imprisoned.
I've been pretty like non-active in the chats. So Nicole has been getting the brunt of it.
You didn't miss much. It was mostly me complaining about all the conflicting research. But anyway, looking at the red-blue dynamic from like a Japanese or an East Asian perspective, there's some overlap. There's also some differences. So one of the biggest ones that I noticed is that red isn't nearly as likely to be associated with evil, but red characters are still very energetic, passionate, often get into trouble, often need to be reined in a little bit by a blue character. And the red-blue dynamic is also often characterized by not violence, conflict. But there's like less emphasis on like inherent good and evil of the characters, and like more emphasis on the fact that like interpersonal intimacy just naturally produces conflict because we're all different. and we all have to learn how to interact with people who are different from us. And the evil that comes up in these plot lines that I was looking at more often arose from the conflict itself, and there was less emphasis on one character being inherently evil.
Yeah, like Kyo and Yuki.
Yeah, this is actually a very common motif in a lot of anime, especially between rivals and or friend. I cannot talk. It took took a really long time.
Yeah. That I spoiled myself on a whole bunch of animes because I just like went on various wikis and just like binge read everything. And it definitely seemed to come up a lot in a lot of popular ones.
Yes.
That makes sense. So now I want to move on to Katsuki. I did kind of notice anime seems to be a little more chill about using secondary colors for main characters, particularly orange. Like orange seemed to be kind of popular. And I noticed it kind of often functions a lot like red does in Western media, although again, for different reasons. Orange seems to be associated with energy, vitality, pride. Pride was a big one. Orange characters are loud to distract from their trauma, their fear of intimacy, and their massive fucking walls.
Oh, damn. That is Katsuki to a T.
Fish getting called out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, one of the many ways Katsuki is main character coded. But we've definitely talked about that before. And then like the whole paired up characters and contrasting colors thing who battle it out or find balance between them, like we mentioned earlier, seems to pop up fairly often. Like obviously this is a big theme in My Hero. Other frenemies like Naruto, Skate the Infinity, honestly, even like Yuki and Kyo. Yeah, and then I asked Maria to confirm that for me. I was like, is this right?
Yeah. This is actually very, very common. It's not just in shonen. It spans through all different types of anime. I think the most common is between siblings, especially if they have different personalities to kind of set them apart. But yeah.
And then on that note, I kind of shoved this dynamic into this part of the timeline because I really, really wanted to talk about. So special mention, the yellow-purple dynamic.
Yes, my favorite.
My favorite from the show comes up a whole lot. So basically this is like the depressed emo / ray of sunshine, like Mirio and Amajiki. Sometimes also exhausted / feral. So think Eraser Mike. We're all familiar. We all love it.
Yeah, but excuse me, you're not even going to mention Denki, Shinso, Jiro, and all the ensuing varying angles of their possibly polyamorous relationship.
For shame, Wyatt. For shame.
It's okay. I knew y'all have that covered.
Colored.
But also Mirio and Amajiki are my favorite. I love them.
We'll talk about it when we get to them.
Yeah, but basically this dynamic is so goddamn shippable. Like there's less conflict than in the red-blue dynamic, somehow more inherently romantic. I had a hard time pinning it down, but it's just like that. Also, clearly Horikoshi's favorite dynamic. He uses it over and over. Like half of the character pairings fall into this category. Like even early versions of Izuku and Katsuki, like you've got emo Izuku and then like chipper smiling genius Katsuki. So
no, my brain hurts. Why would you put this in my brain? Oh no! Oh
it's
God!
True. It's
I know.
True.
It being true is the bad part.
But on that note, Izuku, to no one's surprise, Izuku is a special being in all sorts of ways. So from what I could tell, green motifs are used way less often for anime main characters than any other color. Like obviously there are exceptions like the Green Dragon and Yona of the Dawn, but there's just not that many.
The only note I had for this point is that the Green Dragon from Yona is a hoe too. Like just like Deku and the Deku fan club headcanon we all share. I can see the similarities, and
he's really hot.
Hilarious.
I fucking love him. Not as much as Hawk, but he is a fucking bicon.
He's very popular.
Why? You mentioned Hawk, so now I feel the urge to point out that English Hawk is the same voice as All Might. I am not sorry, because I watched My Hero before I watched Yona, so every time Hawk was talking and being sexy, it was also All Might's voice. So I was very confused, but not unhappy about it. So anyway, I digress. I'm sorry.
Also, Hawk and Yona are the red and blue dynamic, by the way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Pops up again and again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, from what I could tell, it definitely seems like green is firmly a secondary character color, if it's used at all, and a lot of shows skip right over it. Does this relate to the whole green and blue are the same color thing? Possibly, but this is also really common in Western media, and there are a couple of possible reasons for this, as we'll get into. So, like, who knows?
But they are different colors.
This goes back to the fact that Izuku is plain from earlier episode discussions. Oh God, I don't know what my note was for this. But no, it's not really plain, but it does happen to be a color that is used a lot for background characters, so that's where it comes from a little bit.
So
definitely.
Maybe you were going, green isn't used a lot because it doesn't stand out from the background.
Yeah.
So it's equated to plain.
Yeah. Green is also interesting. And this is where I found like the most overlap between Eastern and Western interpretations. Yeah, it's just interesting. So rarely used, as I already mentioned, typically a background color. And then if you see it in character design, it's generally only an accent color. When it is used, especially in the West, it usually means that character is evil.
Yeah. And just in the Western properties that I thought of, you can think of Shigo from Kim Possible on Disney. You can also think of the Slytherins, which is a very rude generalization, and also no turfs at Hogwarts, but I digress. And also Double Trouble from She-Ra, after they firmly, or rather before they firmly established themselves as an anti-hero, anti-villain, and independent person. So
yeah. So one of the reasons for that is that green kind of does this weird thing where if you set bright green against a black and red background, like it can make you uneasy, paranoid, even nauseous. And then certain shades of green, usually like lighter shades, can also, it's just a hard color to wear no matter what your skin tone is. It can also make a character like look kind of sickly. So it's also often associated with weakness or illness. And then the West just associates both of those traits with evil.
Yeah. And you could like a final one I thought of is the character Disgust from Inside Out. Like they're one of the core emotions, and like disgust comes in from like a medical angle. So there may be some sort of biological precedent, but also sick is not evil. So we need to lean back from that as a society.
Yeah. So if a character does have a green motif or a character design, again, usually a secondary character, it's usually a well-saturated or dark green. Although some main antagonists may have a bright or a pale green motif, it can symbolize a whole lot of things. Strong connection to nature. This is like the weird mystical one, or this one has outsider status. A lot of times, like it's a signal that this person is some kind of prodigy or has a supernatural ability, or some connection to evil, even if they aren't evil themselves.
Yeah, and this just made me think of the Vine character, Ibara Shiozaki, who's in Class 1B, and the fact that everyone is pretty sure she's Catholic. So there's that mystical connection.
Forest green is my favorite.
Yes.
Yeah. Dark greens, for people who are fans of green, dark green is usually, like, they usually specify. Green motifs also often fall under like that transitional category. So to give a Western example, Toph Beifong from Avatar: The Last Airbender, when she's with her family, her dress, like the main component of her dress, is pale green. And then her clothes transition to more saturated greens when she's like fighting in the ring or when she leaves her family, since she no longer has to hide her inner strength and her incredible ability. And then, of course, for the My Hero example, Izuku's first costume is a pale greenish, and his second is much darker. Like, it kind of shows that he's starting to accept his status as the main character, and he's starting to come into his own.
Mm-hmm.
And now, second special mention, black and white. I put this here because I had nowhere else to put it again. And I'm just going to talk about this very briefly. And I mostly want to focus on two characters, Dabi and Shigaraki, notably their hair transformations.
I do want to point out this is kind of spoilery.
So spoilery.
So if you're not like caught up on the manga, just look out.
Yeah. So both of these characters end up with white hair.
Yeah. And I made a joke about it in the group chat, and I had to put it here, even though it's probably a really bad joke. But essentially, they both got so stressed out that they lost their melanin about it.
You're not wrong, actually. You're not wrong.
I know. That's what makes it funny, but it's still a bad joke.
So a lot of Westerners might find this transition a little bit confusing because in Western media, like if a character's character design shifts to white, that's like a redemption or like some kind of level up, like think of Gandalf. That's not necessarily the case for like East Asian cultures. Traditionally in Japan, white is the color that's associated with grief and mourning. Both of the hair transformations happen after like big traumatic secret reveals. So yeah, a transition to white doesn't necessarily equal a redemption. Also, grief is complicated, and neither suffering nor honesty automatically make you a better person. I mean, obviously, honesty is a good first step and 1,000% necessary, but like, if that's the only step you take, you're still not going to get anywhere. Unfortunately, shit has to be complicated. It's really frustrating. Also, I wanted to talk about Dabi dyeing his hair black. So black in Japanese culture does have connections to evil, but it also symbolizes like protection. It's like a protective color. Not only is Dabi keeping a big ass secret and hiding from his family, but he also isn't intimate with other characters, and he's not really concerned with loyalty. So basically, he's got like walls on walls on walls. Sometimes the thing protecting you is also the thing harming you. Again, go figure.
Yeah. And I can only imagine the family therapy sessions post canon. Depending on who makes it to post canon.
That's just trauma.
Yeah. Also, I did want to make a point that there is a lot of good conversation happening right now from people of color and their creative voices, at least in the like Western traditional publishing world that I'm tapped into. And they have pointed out that there's a lot of like racist background of the black and dark as evil so-called trope. So we invite our listeners to read and learn about this as broadly as you can, and just make sure you're informed on where the tropes that you're using are coming from, and see if you can.
I have so much to say about this. So much to say.
Yeah, that thing I mentioned earlier about warmer and deeper colors being associated with negative traits.
This
is very. I could go on for days about this. Like, legitimately could go on for days about this. I didn't even read this. I guess I kind of just skipped over it. I don't know.
It was probably another thing that, like, you know, like early Tumblr, where like everybody's comments were like offset from each other, and then if you got deep enough into the conversation, it was just like one character per line and it was completely unreadable. That's what this timeline looked like on mobile. Just so we all know.
So I probably did skip over it, or else I would have added a lot more to this. But yeah, no, this is so I'm also a writer, and I am making a story currently that kind of flips these because it pisses me off so much. I would definitely suggest our listeners to read up more on this, because this is very, in Western culture, it is very much a colonizer thing.
Very much
I think that is the easiest way to put it. So no, I had to definitely grow out of that, because I was I always thought I was different. And for a long time, I really hated my skin tone. Now I'm just like, fuck everything. But it took a while to get to that point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I really don't have that much more to say. But basically just to summarize everything, My Hero's whole thing is that society shouldn't have main characters or rely on just a few people to get shit done.
Yeah. Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah. So like, for example, you've got All Might, who's very main character coded, but he also represents an old, like outdated way of doing things.
Mhm.
Also, he's a critique of Western society, exceptionalism, all that stuff.
Yep.
And then you have Katsuki, who's also fairly main character coded, but is forced to take a step back and play a supporting role, and then ends up being very, very good at it.
Yeah, he's the goodest at it. He is such a good boy. Read the goddamn manga, people.
Yeah, there's a certain point in season 5 where we're going to have a lot more to say about this.
Is it season 5? I feel like it's going to be season 6.
Well,
unless they do a lot of smushing.
well, there's
discuss it
an
off air.
episode that's already happened that made me have a lot of thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when we get to it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably like went off in the group chat.
I'm back with you. I got it.
Yeah. And then, of course, finally, we have Izuku, very secondary character coded, and then learns to step up to the plate in the way Horikoshi wishes everyone in society would, while also being forced to reckon with his limitations and accept help from others. So Izuku, he's the main character, and he really just represents that struggle for balance.
Yeah. And the way you phrased it, the way Horikoshi wishes everyone in society would. God damn, that is the entire show in a nutshell. Amazing job.
Thank y'all. But yeah, my final point is, the color choices in My Hero do a really, really good job of emphasizing the show's overall themes. Is anyone surprised? This was very carefully put together, and that shows in a lot of different ways. So thank you for going on that long ass journey with me. Do you have any final comments?
No, just thank you for teaching me.
Yeah. And like I said before, I'm really glad you took this over. I've had enough of color theory after my degree that I would have had an aneurysm doing this. And yeah. And the fact that I did it at a bar is true Maria style.
It's very you. Yeah. I did have like 4 aneurysms doing this. It got really frustrating in a lot of ways. There's so much information that's behind paywalls, and I have a lot of feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am really glad you took this over, because I probably would have quit midway.
Yeah, oh my God, I got to info dump all over everyone. It was great. I do have one mention. So the Monday episode that comes out after this bonus episode airs is going to be a special episode. Ooh, I wonder what that's about. You'll never guess, but also you'll probably guess. And that's it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to our second bonus episode. As always, go beyond plus ultra, especially on bonuses. Bye, y'all.
Thanks again for listening. If you'd like to get in contact with us, have questions you'd like us to discuss on air, give topic suggestions for bonus episodes, or submit fan art for us to display, visit our website at myheroanalysis.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Just search for @myheroanalysis. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review.